Good morning, everyone. I'm Kerry McCallum. I'm Director of the News and Media Research Centre at the University of Canberra, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here today for the launch of Online Misinformation in Australia, Adults' Experiences, Abilities and Responses. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal people and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd like to also pay respects to any First Nations people from all the different places that you're joining us from today, and to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. So this report is part of an ARC linkage project led by Associate Professor Tanya Notley from Western Sydney University. The project is called Addressing Misinformation Using Media Literacy with Public Cultural Institutions. And I have to say, the project and the report couldn't be more timely. We know that high quality and trustworthy news and information leads to better democratic processes. We also know that misinformation causes a wide range of harms. A comprehensive national strategy to combat misinformation is urgently needed, but it's evidence like the evidence that we're going to hear today from projects like Tanya's and reports like this one that are needed to provide the evidence base. So today we launched the Online Misinformation in Australia report that focuses on Australian adults and positions media literacy as an essential component of a response to misinformation. The report's lead author is the News and Media Research Centre's professorial fellow, Professor Sora Park, and its co-authors are Tanya Notley, TJ Thompson, Amy Hourigan and Michael Deswani. The team has conducted surveys, diary studies, verification testing and interviews to explore how socio-cultural dynamics influence people's information seeking and decision-making behaviours. I'm now going to hand over to the project's lead, Tanya Notley, who'll introduce the project, and then she will hand over to Sora and then TJ to share the report's findings. Four of the project's co-authors are with us today, and there'll be an opportunity for you to put your questions in the Q&A, and we can have a discussion once that's been done. And just to let you know that the session is being recorded. So I'm going to hand over now to Tanya.
Thank you so much, Kerry. We'll just bring our slides up. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today for our report launch. Our team were thrilled to see that more than 200 people had registered in just a few weeks for this event, and this includes people from all levels of government, from many government agencies, local NGOs, media organisations, and from libraries and universities. And this tells us that our report is speaking to a national concern that is a priority issue for people, governments, and organisations across the country. I'd like to start this event by providing you with a little bit of background to contextualise the report that we're launching today. As Kerry mentioned in her intro, this report is part of a national project which is funded by the Australian Research Council Linkage Program and by our universities and industry partners. The QR code on the screen will take you to our project website if you'd like to learn more and stay in touch with the research findings. Our research team are interdisciplinary and bring different expertise to the project. At Western Sydney University, I'm joined by co-researchers Dr. Amy Harrigan and Dr. Simon Chambers. Our research team also includes Professor Michael Deswani from Queensland University of Technology, Professor Sora Park from University of Canberra, and Dr. DJ Thompson from RMIT University. I'd also like to mention the critical and generous support that's being provided by our research partners, who are all national public cultural institutions: ABC Education, Australian Library and Information Association, Museum of Australian Democracy, and National Film and Sound Archive of Australia. Our team and partners recognise that addressing misinformation requires a multi-pronged approach, and now this is widely accepted across policy and research. We know we need multiple things, and we need them happening at the same time to face this challenge. So appropriate regulation is needed. Proactive action from platforms is required. Citizens need to be able to access high quality, relevant and timely news and information. And citizens also need education so they can identify misinformation and produce and share high quality news and information with their own personal networks. And this is where our project is focused, on understanding and addressing the education needs of adult Australians. Media literacy is now widely recognised as a critical form of literacy that is essential for full participation in society. We need media literacy to stay connected with family and friends, to find employment, to engage with social services, to take action on issues that matter to us. So to explain what we mean by media literacy, a person is media literate if they're able to access, use, create and share a diverse range of media while critically reflecting on that engagement. But this requires lifelong learning. As media systems and practices change, our knowledge and abilities need to develop as well. So media literacy pedagogy combines educational approaches that support critical thinking, knowledge about media industries and environments, and digital skills. A critical orientation towards media is at the heart of media literacy, and this is often what distinguishes media literacy from other approaches like digital literacy or digital safety, which might not have that focus. To connect our project with international trends, many countries around the world have had government-led or government-supported national media literacy strategies in place for more than a decade, sometimes decades. This includes countries like Finland, Belgium, France, Canada, the Netherlands. In all of those countries that I've just mentioned, there are strong and trusted public cultural institutions with public education mandates. And so these organisations lead or play a very important role in developing the media literacy of citizens. In Australia, our project is connected with the Australian Media Literacy Alliance, UMLA, which comprises national public cultural institutions who are each implementing media literacy projects nationally and who together advocate for a national strategic approach to media literacy in Australia. For the past 12 months, we've been focused in our project on collecting data. As part of this work, we've conducted 4 interrelated studies. So first, we surveyed 3,852 adults, a representative sample of Australians, to understand their media practices, attitudes, and their confidence in their own abilities. Second, we tested the ability of 2,115 of these adults to see if they were able to assess the credibility of information on websites and social media platforms. Next, we supported 55 of these adults to collect data about their experiences with online news and information over 1 week as part of a mobile diary study. And then finally, we interviewed 20 of these participants to explore how sociocultural dynamics influence people's information seeking and their decision-making behaviours. So the report that we're launching today is the second report we've released as part of our project, and it draws on data from the last 3 studies that you can see here on the screen. Our 4 public cultural institution partners are now working to respond to this research data. Each partner organisation will be producing and piloting media literacy projects to help adult Australians identify, avoid and respond to misinformation. And they'll be doing that over the next 12 months as we work with them. So with that introduction, I'll now hand over to Sora Park to begin presenting our research findings.
Thanks, Tanya. Hello, my name is Sora Park, and I'll share some of the key findings from the information verification test, which is the second phase of the study. We gave participants 4 different tasks to test their ability and verify information on websites and social media posts. They were asked to evaluate the content and whether it was reliable and trustworthy, and then explain how they came to that conclusion. They were told that the articles were real-life articles and were asked to imagine that they encountered the example online in real life and asked them to do what they would normally do to check its accuracy. And they were free to search online on any device they had at hand. This is one example of the 4 tasks. This one was designed to assess people's ability to question and evaluate social media posts that have multiple components, text, image, comments from other users that can have conflicting messages. It was a real-life post by Lyle Shelton, who is an Australian conservative politician and activist. The post is implying election misconduct through a photo of ballot boxes being moved. We selected this task given that misinformation often comes in form of innuendo that suggests something might be problematic. The task assessed people's ability to identify who the author of the post is by searching online and to determine the potential agenda that might be involved. We also assessed people's ability to critically evaluate and fact-check the suggestion being made in the post that the photos may be showing election misconduct. It's relatively easy to find information online with 2 fact-checked articles clearly outlining why this suggestion of improper behavior is false. You can also easily find information about the post author. We had 3 other similar tasks. One was an Instagram post with incorrect labeling, another about sponsored content on a news website, and another one comparing Wikipedia to an advocacy website. You can see them in detail in the report, but for the sake of time, I'll just now share some of the key findings. The first finding is that the vast majority of adult Australians scored poorly on all 4 tasks. I'll show you the actual scores in a minute, but first, I'd like to explain how we scored the responses and group people based on their scores. In all of the 4 tasks, the first question had a correct answer, yes or no. Those who selected the incorrect answer were classified as disqualified and were automatically assigned a 0 score. The second question asked participants to explain how they reached the conclusion. For those who gave the correct answer in the first question, we marked their open text responses according to a detailed rubric. We gave marks for a range of answers, including questioning the source, searching for the authenticity of the source, identifying bias or agenda in a story. You can see in the table below the raw scores for each task, and you can see that the score is very low. Only about 1 to 3% of the respondents received a full mark for each task, and the vast majority scored 0. We then combined the scores from the 4 tasks to come up with an aggregate score that ranges from 0 to 8. We grouped the respondents into 3 categories based on their scores in the 4 tasks: no ability, 0, emerging ability, 1 to 3, and developing ability, 4 to 8 marks. The results raise serious concerns about the ability of adult Australians to identify misinformation online. Almost half, 45%, showed no ability to take basic steps to verify information, and 52% had only an emerging ability. Only 3% of respondents were ranked with a developing ability, which means they scored at least 4 out of 8 marks, meaning they got at least half of the marks. Another important finding is that the ability to verify information online is low across the board, across all age groups. There wasn't much of a difference between age groups, but older people tended to score slightly lower. There were other factors that were related to respondents' ability. Education was an important factor. Those with a bachelor's degree and above are more likely to score higher. 60% of those with low education scored 0, and compared to 38% of those with high education. Another indication of people's ability to verify information is their awareness of the term media literacy. We asked respondents whether they were familiar with the word media literacy in the first adult media literacy survey. There was a strong association between awareness of this term and their actual ability to verify information online. Only 35% of those who said they were familiar with the term scored 0, compared to 50% of those who said they were not familiar. The second key finding is people's online behaviors and attitudes were related to their ability to verify information. Based on the number of social media platforms people used in the past week, we group people into heavy, 6 or more platforms, moderate, 3 to 6, light, 1 to 2 platforms, and non-users. Adults who don't use any social media scored the lowest in the information verification test, with 55% of this group being in the no ability group. This is a 15 percentage point gap between the heavy user group. It's likely that those who are used to social media platforms and use it a lot may know more about the ways in which information can be shown to them. There was an even larger gap between heavy and non-news consumers. Only 36% of heavy news consumers were in the no ability category, compared to 59% of non-news consumers. That is a 24% difference. This indicates that regularly accessing quality information verified by journalists may help people distinguish fact-based and fact-checked stories from other information. In our adult media literacy survey, we asked people if they were confident in checking if a website can be trusted and whether they can check if something they found online is true. About 42% and 39% said they were confident, respectively. As you can see, the overall confidence level is very low. However, their actual ability is even lower. While those with high confidence generally scored higher than those with low confidence, I'd like to note that among those who felt confident that they could check if something they found online is true, a large proportion, 39%, scored 0 across all 4 tasks. 40% of those saying they are confident they can check if a website can be trusted also scored 0 on all of the tasks. There are many people who are confident but are not able to demonstrate actual ability, showing that people are overestimating their ability to verify information. To better understand the approaches and usefulness of the strategies people adopt when they are encountered with dubious information, we qualitatively analyzed the written justification in the open text answers. This revealed a few unhelpful strategies people were applying when trying to verify information. Here are some examples of why people misjudge the post or web page. First, many people applied blanket cynicism or judgment based on their assumption that certain institutions, media, or platforms can or cannot be trusted, without investigating or providing a reason as to why that might be the case. Many people said things like, "You can't trust anything on social media." People also made decisions based on their existing beliefs without further investigating the claims made in a post or questioning the source. For example, people would say things like, anyone can edit Wikipedia, so it can't be true. There were many responses that talk about past experiences as their reason, or focusing on the appearance of the post or web page. We found that many people accept content at face value, mostly based on their gut feeling or emotional response, rather than questioning the content itself. These unhelpful strategies prevented people from engaging in lateral reading to verify sources and information, or searching information to verify the facts. Even fewer people conducted things like reverse image search. I'll now pass over to my colleague and co-author, TJ Thompson, who will present some of the findings from the diary and interview study.
Thank you, Sora. Thank you all for joining us. So over the next 12 or so minutes, I have the pleasure of guiding us through the qualitative components of the project. So Sora's just spoken to some of the nationally representative data that gives us a nice sense of breadth overall in Australia. How are we doing with this issue? And with the qualitative components, we can get a better sense of depth and richness and nuance to look into the everyday experiences of online misinformation that people are encountering and responding to. So to do this and try to get this richness and depth, we had two qualitative dimensions. The first of these was a mobile diary study. So we asked our participants, 55 of them, to kind of keep track for a week and share with us the examples of news and information that they encounter organically in their routines every day. So on day one, we said, introduce yourself with a selfie video, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what you do, what your online information and news-seeking information behaviors look like. And then in days 2 to 6, we asked folks to document and share with us examples of the news and information they consume, and to reflect each night on the examples they shared in terms of their trustworthiness. Then on the last day of the week, we asked them to reflect on the week as a whole and to give us a sense of, is this a more or less representative, typical week of online information and news searching for you? Or is it a bit of an outlier or atypical week for some reasons? Maybe you're on holidays or traveling, that kind of thing. So we tried to get a lot of context from folks over this 1 week diary study through the examples that folks shared with us. After we had the diary study, we then had a fourth component, which was the follow-up interview component. And my colleague Amy Harrigan and I interviewed folks, 20 participants, to try to get a little bit more understanding of the examples they shared, a little bit more depth and richness, as well as get some ideas about their media literacy interests and needs, online information verification behaviors, and their trust in various information sources. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The first of our key findings was that the majority of our participants did find and encounter organically misinformation in that 1 week period. So about 80% of our diary study participants found misinformation, things that were false, misleading, or they thought were not trustworthy in some way. Participants shared with us more than 1,600 examples of claims they found online during that 1 week period. And for a qualitative study, 1,600 claims is a lot to kind of work through and analyze and parse. So it's taken a lot of coding work to get to a sense of what's happening with this data. We've tried to get that done for us all today. And if we look at the average number of misinformation claims per person per week, it was about 7.5 claims on average per person per week for the folks who did encounter misinformation in that 1 week period. You can see here some concrete examples of some of the types of claims that people were finding organically and sharing with us in this diary study. So I think really pleasingly, about a quarter of our sample was culturally and linguistically diverse, folks who spoke a language other than English at home. And so we had examples in different languages. We had examples that were coming to us in different communication modes, some that were in written format, some that in visual format, like the video in the middle, and some that were in audio format, like the podcast on the right. We also saw lots of different platforms where the claims were coming from. So Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, lots of different platforms as well that were involved with sharing or amplifying these claims that participants thought were dodgy or false or misleading. So we looked at 3 different aspects in our analysis to date. The first of those aspects was what kind of topic is related to these misinformation claims that people are finding and sharing with us. So are these claims about, health information or health news, political news, that kind of thing? We found that in our diary study, economics was the most prevalent claim. So people have a lot of concern, I think, about economics. We're in a cost of living crisis. And so kind of our wallets and our dollar and the bottom line is really top of mind for a lot of people. And we're kind of perhaps more attuned to seeing information about money and about the wider economic system in terms of people trying to influence politics and discourse through focusing on the economics frame. We also saw a fair bit of misinformation about celebrity. So either misinformation about celebrities or misinformation that used celebrities to try to impersonate them and say, buy our product because Dr. So-and-so has endorsed our product when actually that doctor hadn't actually endorsed or vetted that product. We also saw a fair bit of misinformation on crime and crisis. So if we go to the next slide, we can see some concrete examples of each of these different topics. So at left, an example of the economics topic. In the middle, an example from the celebrity topic category, and on the right, an example from the crime and crisis category. We can see here kind of a breakdown of the different topics overall. So again, we've already mentioned business economics, celebrity and crime and crisis as the top 3. But I think kind of just stepping back and taking a little bit of a step back, This kind of helps us appreciate that misinformation isn't just about the kind of dry, boring, serious topics, if you will, like politics or health. Misinformation can kind of be attached to or related to lots of different topics, things like sports, things like entertainment, things like celebrity. Those are also as likely in some cases to be attached to misinformation as are the kind of traditional suspects like politics and health news and information. In our second part of the analysis, we looked at the communication mode that the claim was relayed through. So is this a claim coming through a infographic, a chart, a video, a social media post, an audio story or a podcast, that kind of thing? And in our diary study, folks found the highest number of misinformation, false misleading claims in written or text-based format. So about 60% or so of the misleading claims that folks found and shared with us were in written text-based format. And of those, headlines were quite prevalent. And I think that kind of speaks to how people engage with the online environment. Oftentimes you're just kind of scrolling through and seeing lots of headlines. You might not necessarily take the time to stop and click or tap into a story and get more context. You just kind of see the headline and go on. So I think headlines were really prevalent because of how people use the internet and look through social media oftentimes. We can see an example here of some of these text-based claims. And in this example, it wasn't the headline, it wasn't the image, it was the written text of the article itself that participants thought were either false, misleading, or untrustworthy in some way. And our third bit of analysis was on the source of misinformation. But before we get to that sourcing question, we'll just pop back one slide, sorry, and just have a little bit of a gander at our findings overall with the different modes. So as I said before, more than 60% were in written text format. We had what we called multimodal format as well, so the mixing of more than one mode, so text with image or image with video, that kind of thing. Video by itself at 11%, image by itself at 3%, and audio by itself at 1%. And as I mentioned, our last key finding was about sourcing. So who or what is either creating these claims and propagating them or sharing them or amplifying them? And surprisingly, I think very surprisingly, at least for me, was that mainstream and alternative news sources were the top most prevalent purveyors of what folks in our diary study were considering as false, misleading, or untrustworthy information. So this perhaps speaks to low trust in news and news media, polarization perhaps a little bit, but there were other sources of misinformation as well. We can go to the next slide and have a little bit of a look at those other sources. Within mainstream alternative news sources, about 80% of these sources were domestic news or alternative or mainstream domestic news. The remaining 20% were international. So you have a little bit of a mix between here, kind of Aussie-grown misinformation and overseas misinformation. And if you go to the next slide, we can see kind of a breakdown of the source across different categories. And I can just, if I scroll through my own little slides here, just to get my notes up in front of me, we have a few more granular findings about the social media breakdown. So that second category, the 18% of claims in social media, these were 60% by meta platforms, so Facebook and Instagram, 40% shared on Reddit, on X, 7%, YouTube, 5%, and TikTok, 1%. So that kind of just gives you a little bit more clarity on where on social media those 18% of claims are coming from. And you can see here in descending order remaining sources of misinformation that participants shared with us. So our kind of final key finding leaves us on a positive, helpful note, because we found that a majority of Australians do want access to media literacy support. And I think that's very encouraging for all of us. They also want governments to kind of step up and do their fair share and platforms to do their fair share as well. So 80%, 4 in 5 Australians agree that misinformation is an issue, is a problem that we want to tackle and address. And I think very pleasingly, 93%, very overwhelming majority, want to be taught how to identify misinformation. The survey slides that Sora spoke to earlier kind of speak to folks' lack of ability to do this. So there definitely needs to be more training and education, we think, on how to identify misinformation. People think that platforms should be doing more to monitor, label, and remove misinformation, and that governments have a role to play as well in terms of helping social media remove misinformation that could be harmful to consumers online. So with that being said, I think we can pass to Carrie again for our Q&A. I think we already have some questions in the Q&A and look forward to having a discussion with you all in the coming minutes.